In the middle of a grand ball at the royal palace in Paris, a shocking and terrifying event unfolded on a cold winter night. 6 men, including the young King Charles VI of France, were dancing in costumes that were nothing short of dangerous. These costumes were made of linen soaked in wax and covered in hemp, making them look like wild, hairy creatures. The room was filled with guests, torches, and laughter. But what happened next was a nightmare that no one could have predicted. As the dancers moved around the room, one of the guests, Louis d'Orléans, entered with a torch, despite a strict ban on any flames. In a moment of carelessness, or perhaps a cruel joke, he held the torch too close to the dancers. A spark flew, and within seconds, the costumes were engulfed in flames. 4 of the men burned to death, their screams filling the air. The only survivors were the king, who was saved by the quick thinking of a young duchess, and another man who managed to jump into a large water container. This tragic event, known as the Bal des Ardents, or the Ball of the Burning Men, was a turning point in the history of France. It exposed the reckless and decadent lifestyle of the royal court, and the dangers that came with it. But to understand the full impact of this event, we need to look back at the events leading up to it. Charles VI became King of France at the age of 11, following the death of his father, Charles V. Despite his young age, he was initially seen as a promising leader, but his reign was marked by periods of mental instability. When he was 24, he suffered a severe breakdown, which included violent outbursts and periods of delusion. This breakdown was so severe that he was often referred to as Charles the Mad. To manage his condition, his personal physician, Guillaume de Harsigny, was summoned. Harsigny was a respected and learned man, 92 years old, who had studied medicine in Cairo and Salerno. Under his care, Charles's fever subsided, and he began to recover. However, the king's mental state remained fragile. During Charles's illness, the power dynamics at court shifted. His uncles, the Dukes of Berry and Burgundy, seized control of the government. They dismissed the king's council, including 2 key figures, Jean de Rivière and Pierre de Mercier. These men, known as the Marmosets, were seen as loyal to the king, but were now considered a threat to the uncle's power. Rivière and Mercier were arrested, their properties confiscated, and they were sent to prison. This move was swift and brutal, demonstrating the uncle's determination to solidify their control. One of the key figures in this power struggle was Inguer, and the 7th Lord of Coucy. Coucy was a respected nobleman and a close ally of the king. However, when the uncles took control, Coucy made a strategic decision to align himself with them. He played a role in the arrest of Rivière and even benefited from the downfall of Mercier, who was a former colleague and friend. Coucy was given Mercier's castle and its revenues, a move that was both a reward and a way to secure his loyalty. Despite the uncle's efforts to control the government, Charles VI's condition improved, and he began to regain some of his authority. He pressed for the release of his former counselors, and public opinion began to shift in their favor. After 18 months in prison, Rivière and Mercier were released and banished from court, but their property was restored. The next major figure to fall from grace was Olivier de Clisson, the Constable of France. Clisson was a powerful and influential nobleman, and his dismissal was a significant victory for the dukes. When Clisson came to see Burgundy to discuss the government's affairs, Burgundy accused him of amassing a vast fortune and ordered him to leave. Clisson, aware of the danger, fled to his castle in Brittany. Burgundy, determined to punish Clisson, sent a force led by Coucy to capture him. However, Clisson managed to escape, and Burgundy used his flight as an opportunity to convict him in absentia and confiscate his property. The king, under the care of Harsigny, seemed to be recovering by the end of September. He made a pilgrimage to thank Notre Dame de Lys, a church known for a miraculous story of crusaders and a statue of the Virgin. This act of piety was seen as a sign of his return to sanity. However, Harsigny advised the court to be cautious with the king, warning that his mind was still fragile and that he should be spared the burdens of state. Harsigny, a wise and ancient figure, eventually returned to his home in Laon, leaving behind a unique tomb. The tomb's effigy was a stark and honest representation of death, showing Harsigny as a naked, emaciated corpse. This image reflected the growing awareness of the fragility of life and the inevitability of death, a theme that would become increasingly prevalent in the 14th century. Back in Paris, the court resumed its decadent lifestyle. The king, now referred to as Charles le Bien, Aimé the Well-Beloved, was known for his affability and generosity. However, the court was also marked by extravagance and excess. Queen Isabeau and her sister-in-law, Valentina, competed in fashion and opulence, wearing dresses adorned with jewels and elaborate hairstyles. The common people, while loving the king, disapproved of the court's excesses and the influence of foreign nobles from Bavaria and Italy. The night of the Bal des Ardents was a turning point. The king and his courtiers, driven by a desire for excitement and novelty, decided to hold a masquerade to celebrate the remarriage of one of the queen's ladies-in-waiting. The idea of the Wood Savages was proposed by Hugues de Gissé, a man known for his cruel and insolent behavior. The costumes, made of flammable materials, were a recipe for disaster. When the dancers were set on fire, the horror was unimaginable. The king was saved by the quick thinking of the Duchess de Berry, but 4 men died in agony. The event shocked the court and the nation, and it had lasting consequences. The uncles who had been in control were now seen as responsible for the king's well-being. The court's decadent lifestyle was criticized, and the need for more responsible governance became clear. The Bal des Ardents serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of recklessness and the unpredictability of life. It also highlights the complex power struggles within the royal court and the fragility of the king's mental health. The event was a wake-up call, a moment when the court and the nation were forced to confront the consequences of their actions and the need for more thoughtful leadership. In the end, the Bal des Ardents was more than just a tragic accident. It was a symbol of the broader issues facing France at the time. It was a reminder that even in a world of wealth and power, the line between joy and disaster can be frighteningly thin.